Sisters on Fire, Part 5. Edward sat in his room, tears streaming down his face as he called his friend Tim, who happened to be a detective. The doctor was summoned for questioning by some officers who had come to help. The doctor said, "Yes, I sent a nurse from the hospital, but it wasn't her, it was Debbie." He showed a picture to Edward and the officers, confirming that the person was an imposter. Hope and Nurse Debbie had switched places and played their roles perfectly. Detective Kim interjected, "This seems like someone in the household gave a helping hand. It's not just Hope or Debbie. There are more than 2 people involved in this." Edward cried harder, threatening, "If I don't find my babe and mom, I'm going to bring down that hospital." The living room was filled with tension as some of the mates were called in for questioning. Did anyone see Mrs. Davis leave the house? Was she also adopted? An officer asked. Madam Unkosi, clutching her apron, wept bitterly, her eyes red and puffy. "I had gone to church that very evening for our evening prayer service. I didn't see anything. Oh dear Lord, punish them all for this evil they have committed," she cried, her voice cracking with emotion. The old woman's display of sorrow and devotion made everyone in the room feel her pain. That night, in a small, dimly lit room filled with torture instruments and stench of fear, Ella was injured and crying. Mrs. Davis was tied up nearby. "Why did you do this? I never knew you were like this. Ever since you were saved by my friend, I never got the chance to see you until you came in for the burial," she said to the imposter, now regaining her strength. The real Hope soon walked in laughing. "You all are so dumb. I can't believe my whole plan worked." It was soon revealed that Nurse Debbie was actually Hope. While Hope had been masquerading as Nurse Debbie, they had orchestrated the entire plan together. The real Hope explained how she had manipulated everything and made Nurse Debbie put substance in Mrs. Davis' food to keep her dependent, allowing Hope to stay by her side until the plan was executed. Mrs. Davis, with tears in her eyes, said, "How could you? Is this because of Agnes? Well, kill me instead. Ella has nothing to do with it. Let my family go. It was all my fault. Don't you dare tell me what to do." Hope screamed angrily, her voice echoing off the grimy walls. The next morning, Edward received a text message. "Your mom will be saved, but you can't save Ella. She deserves to die the same way Agnes did. Say goodbye to Ella because tonight we'll finally burn alive and meet God for judgment." Edward cried bitterly but noticed this time it wasn't a private number. He immediately called Detective Tim and they began tracing the number. It led them to a building where they found only Mrs. Davis helplessly lying on the floor. Seeing his mother in such a state, Edward broke down. Overwhelmed with emotion, 2 policemen gently carried Mrs. Davis to the car, with Edward following closely. They drove urgently to the hospital, hoping for a swift recovery. Detective Tim, sensing they had just evacuated, insisted, "Someone tipped them off. There is no way they would have known otherwise." While the other officers continued searching for clues to link them to the kidnappers, Tim went back to the Davis house secretly later that evening. He searched the house thoroughly and soon found a clue. He had seen Madam Ngozi making suspicious calls, so he approached her and searched her phone. He saw the same number that had texted Edward last and arrested her, telling her not to make any sound. Madam Ngozi claimed she was innocent and that it was all a setup. However, after much pressure and questioning at the station, she admitted to being part of the scheme. She explained, "I urgently needed money for my son's treatment, but Mrs. Davis didn't help me. A woman approached me at the hospital offering the money I needed if I allow my daughter, a nurse, to swap places and execute her plan. I accepted without thinking twice because Mrs. Davis is a very evil woman. I've served her all my life, and what have I gained in return? Just just a little help I asked her, and she couldn't provide it, saying she would get back to me. Tears flowed down Madam Ngozi's eyes as she spoke. The officers felt pity for the old woman, but Detective Tim remained focused. Where is Hope going to born Ella? He demanded. When Madam Ngozi refused to answer, Tim threatened, I have tracked down the hospital where your son is. I will ensure he gets no treatment until you confess. If Ella dies, your son dies too. Fear and pain pushed Madam Ngozi into spilling the whole secret. You must hurry. By now, she might have already executed her plan, she said, her voice shaking in fear. Meanwhile, Hope was seen pouring fuel around a place, ready to burn it down with Ella inside. As you can see, I don't care about the consequence. I'd rather die than be arrested. My joy is that you will die too, and I will continue torturing you in hell, she laughed. Detective Tim, along with the officers and Edward, rushed to the location to find Hope and Ella. Please, don't shoot her, Edward pleaded. I will explain why later. As they approached, Hope had already set the place on fire. Ella screamed and fought for her life. Hope grabbed her and threatened to cut her wrist if she made another move. But when Hope saw the tattoo on Ella's wrist, something in her recognized it. Her memory jolted and she began to feel dizzy. She screamed, Ella! Mom! Dad! Fire! And collapsed. Ella was confused. She looked at her wrist and then at Hope's wrist, seeing the same tattoo. Despite the increasing flames, she sobbed bitterly. Could this be Anna? Please wake up. Who are you? She couldn't leave Hope alone and wept as the flames intensified. The fire extinguishers soon arrived along with Edward and the detective, and they managed to save both girls who had lost consciousness. In the hospital, Edward was torn between happiness and guilt. He was happy that Anna was alive, but felt deeply guilty for having dated her sister Ella without knowing the truth. His emotion a mix of relief and regret. When Anna opened her eyes, she said, What happened? My head hurt. They asked her her name and she replied, Anna. Ella jumped up and hugged her tight. With a tear rolling down her cheek, Anna said, I miss you too, Ella. As a result of the trauma and manipulation she had endured, Anna was not arrested. She had been cursed into her actions, and her memory loss was a significant factor in her defense. The authorities took into action her mental state and the input from the victims. Ella and Mrs. Davis, deeply moved by her plight, advocated for leniency. Anna felt incredibly guilty for hurting her only sister, Ella. She begged Ella for forgiveness, tears streaming down her face. Ella, though hurt, forgave her sister, understanding the pain and manipulation she had suffered. A few days later, Miss Ellen was back at the mansion. They all sat down to listen as she recounted how she saved Anna and everything that had happened. Miss Ellen still loved Anna as her daughter and accepted Ella too, despite being sad about Agnes' demise. Anna also observed Edward and Ella, sensing their guilt. I support your love for each other. Don't feel sad for me. It's been years. I found someone I love in the States, but my thirst for revenge brought me back here, forgetting everything, she said to them. Ella felt bad but was happy her sister found love and that Edward could be with her. She was overjoyed to have her sister back. They hugged and no charges were pressed, except that Madam Ngozi and Nurse Debbie were fired, but they helped their dying son in need of a kidney survive. A few months later, Ella and Edward had a beautiful wedding that was a resounding success. Mrs. Davis, now much better, had come to accept them both wholeheartedly. Detective Tim, Edward's loyal friend, was there to support them, adding to the joyous occasion. Anna's boyfriend, Dave, flew in from the United States to attend the wedding. In front of everyone, he proposed to Anna, bringing even more joy to the celebration. Despite her past loss, Miss Ellen decided to embrace the future with hope, focusing on the happiness of her remaining daughters, Anna and Ella. Together, they looked forward to a future filled with love and new beginnings. We've reached the conclusion of this captivating story. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed creating it. What insights or lessons did you gain from this tale? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for your love and support. Stay tuned for my next story, and don't forget to follow my page so you don't miss out on Berry's animated tales. Thank you.